Welcome to the Altis podcast. I am your host, Stu McMillan. In this series of podcasts, I'm sitting down with speakers and contributors to the upcoming Altis Speed Summit, brought to you by 3x4 Genetics and taking place in Chicago, June 6th, 7th, and 8th. A huge thank you to our sponsors, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, Team Builder, and Output Sports for making this event possible. If you haven't yet secured your ticket, please do it now. Head over to altis.world. This event was going to be incredible. Today's episode features my good friend and former Altis intern, Chris Miller. Chris is now a performance and reconditioning specialist with Mount Sinai Health System's Performance 360 program. Yep, that's a mouthful, in New York City. Before that, Chris spent 3 years with the Brooklyn Nets, and prior to that, he worked with the U.S. ski and snowboard team. We spent most of this conversation reflecting on his time in the NBA, what he learned, and how the environment shaped his thinking, and how it compares to working in more individual, development-focused sports like skiing and snowboarding. As always, we started off by asking Chris, what does he do, and why does he do it?
Um, I always like to keep it simple. I always just say I'm a coach, and it's funny because you can say you're a coach, and as soon as you explain like what you like maybe do on a day to day, people are like, oh, you're a trainer. Like they're gonna call you a trainer no matter what. So I was like, probably doesn't matter what I say I do or I am. Just like so, um, yeah, I'm a coach, and I think that I keep it simple in that way because I have a lot of respect for coaching. Um, I think there's this penchant to want to chop it up into these different pieces and be like use fancy words to talk about all the things that coaches do. Oh, I'm a sports scientist. I'm a performance and reconditioning specialist. I'm a this. I'm a that, and it's great. I think it helps people get paid for sure. But I think coaching is all of that and more. I think coaching just takes the holistic view. And I think the holistic view is really what I've tried to orient my practice on. Even though I definitely, when I first started coaching, I wanted to be a technician. I want to be like the guy that when people think speed, they think Chris Miller, right? Um, but the more you learn about it, the more you look into what all the factors that drive performance, the more you have to zoom out. You get forced to zoom out, and it's fun to zoom out. I have a lot of curiosity. I like learning and just finding another connection to a different field is a really fun process, and then taking deep dives and just seeing how all the pieces fit. Um, and I think again, to get back to it, like to get to the question, like putting the pieces together, I think is what coaches do, is what we do as coaches. And so I always stick to what do you do? Like I coach. I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking to put the pieces together and um, help people express themselves and to kind of allude to some things you said with Andrew. I do think that is kind of the highest aim of athletics and why it's so magnetic, because it allows that self-expression, um, and then to be able to have a role in facilitating that is really what I'm all about.
Is that then the why you do it? If there's two questions there, what do you do? You're coach. Why do you do it? Is to help athletes express their individuality, their X, Y, Z. Is that the why, or is there something a little bit bigger or smaller,
There's
deeper?
definitely more, I think, to the why. I think 'cause I want to, I obviously have my own like internal motivations as far as coaching goes. I think a huge part of it is that I love to learn, right? And we were just talking about it's such a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary field. I love to learn. My mom's entire side of the family is educators. She's got a couple master's degrees. Both grandparents were college professors and the family joke is more degrees than a thermometer. So huge value for education. My grandfather moved over here from Kenya in like the 60s, I want to say, and just to get his education, and then taught all of his kids that your education is your inheritance. And so there's always been that value for education and learning. And I'm not going to say that I like school so much. I think I definitely, I think I can find structure to be a bit restricting to just my natural curiosity. If I'm following a vein of curiosity, I'm fairly inexhaustible. We can go down a rabbit hole, right?
You can do all of those things though in many other different fields. It doesn't, I mean, that's not unique to coaching. That, you know, you
But
you're
I
curious
think
and you want to learn about a bunch of different things. Well, I mean, coaching is one vehicle for you to be able to explore that, but there's why coaching specifically?
definitely from one, the segue from being an athlete. And I would say the other part of it is how I connect to people, right? Everybody that's closest to me in my life, like we've gone to the well together in some way. That mutual push, which I experienced and kind of learned through movement and through, I ran track and cross country, and you go put in a 75-mile week at altitude in the summer with some guys, like you're learning a lot about yourself, and you're learning a lot about the people that you're shoulder to shoulder with. And then feeling the kind of that emergent quality of our collective will. That's a really intoxicating feeling for me, like working in a team that is truly aligned in purpose, truly just bought in. It's real, you know. I think it cuts through a lot of the veneer, cuts through a lot of the just a lot of BS. Honestly, I think there's quite a lot of it can cut through ego and just presentation of self and all this thing. And it's like I'm experiencing this person. The big like show me, don't tell me, like who are you? Can we count on each other? Are we pulling in the same direction? And then enjoying the feeling of that flow. There's a gravity to it that I find to be just hard to replicate in other situations and scenarios. And so I think you kind of combine the love of learning with the love of just that pursuit and that camaraderie and that teamwork, it all sounds pretty trite when you're talking about sports, right? You're just like, oh man, it's great to like get in the trenches with your buddies and like but again, I think that this collective will is something that makes just humankind who and what we are, you know.
You spoke about that as being an emergent quality. Is there do you feel like that is an emergent quality, or is there a way to pre-construct that in advance?
I think the best we can do as coaches is to try to facilitate, try to set the conditions for that to happen. And I think that can happen. That it's best that happens in more subtle ways, because
Mm.
it can, I think, feel forced if you're like just constantly harping on take the classic example of any sport organization or team being like, we're a family, right?
Mhm.
We're gonna leverage this entity that we all have experienced to say like, no, like this is just like what we are. It's like you have to become that. Like we're not like you weren't born into this team. Like you have to become that. And I think that what we can do as coaches is set the stage, is set for me. It's always setting fairly basic expectations. Like I think I've talked about this with my ski team athletes before, where I had the development teams, and I'm trying to teach professional habits. I'm trying to hey, we are becoming professionals, and so simple, kind of simple kind of calling card: on time, on task. Here's our professional habits. Here's our like, we are accountable to each other for this. And we have a shared directive. Easy. And then we're working from a place of mutual respect. And when we are working from that place of mutual respect, then we're creating an environment where fail, it's fine. Like, I want you to fail. Like, we learn through error prediction and correction, right? Like, if you're not messing it up at some point, I'm not challenging you enough. So if I kind of set, here's a small intent, or here's a basic intent, and then here are the conditions for you to experiment and explore in this space, then that I think prompts our athletes into more vulnerability. It's like, this is an okay place to fail. It's an okay place to mess it up. This is an okay place to go to the well when we're all going to the well. Like, we're all gonna go to the well together. Like, and this is classic half miler. You're going to the well every like, twice a week. You're going to the well. Like, you're seeing, we're getting the wheels run off you twice a week. And I think there's just very little pretense in that space. There's very little that you can do to, like, hide in that. And to be quite frank, like, we don't want you to hide. Like, it's fine. Like, so and so just went for it, blew up, whatever. We're gonna celebrate that, and then we're gonna come back, and we're probably gonna blow up again. But this is where a lot of, like, deep learning is. So I think you can set some conditions where it becomes a bit more likely for that kind of cohesion to emerge. But can you just kind of instruct it or create it? Highly doubt it. I've seen people try to do it, and again, when you overcook it, it just becomes, you just get eye rolls, and then people actually has the opposite effect. People are more resistant, and it then becomes a really hard repair job as well, because now everyone's perception is, this is fake. Like, I'm being manipulated, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to feel manipulated, so they're going to push back on you now. So I think just set the preconditions, and don't try to do too much, stand and deliver.
How difficult is it to do that in a professional sporting environment as opposed to a more amateur sporting environment? I could see how that would be pretty easy to do in the US ski and snowboard junior program or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just, sorry, these kids are just learning.
Yeah.
And many of these, basic expectations, basic conditions, setting these things are brand new to them. And they're bought into that almost immediately. And you can set these boundary conditions where these things can emerge. I would expect that this would be significantly more challenging in a professional environment, especially for a lower level member of the support staff. So I know the answer to the question. Answer it anyway. But then what then is the next step? Is it just a shrugging of the shoulders and you just wait it out, and maybe, over the course of time, maybe you can have a small impact on these conditions, these expectations, on setting these expectations? Or is it just a shrugging of the shoulders and say, I'll just wait for the next gig, or I'll get back into amateur sport or a private organization?
Right. No, I think in one sense, the anytime you have juniors, amateur sports, whatever it is, definitely a lot easier to kind of be more of a top-down coach. You have some authority there that they actually give a shit about. Oh, my bad. Can I swear on this podcast?
Do whatever you want, man.
Right on. Yeah, you have
I'm
some.
not whatever you want, but you can go ahead.
Right, right. I was gonna say you
Where-
don't want to give me that much license, but I take your meaning. Yeah, so I think with amateur athletes, it's about, you can do that kind of top down thing. I think one thing to keep in mind is that even within the NBA, like the average age is pretty low. Like, so a lot of the guys you're working with, even though they're giants, are still under 30. Like they got they're 6'8" with 4 kids and they're going bald, but they're like 26. So I think there can still be a relationship of, okay, I've got this experience that I would like to use to help you, right? And I think the way that you have less gravity, but you can still use that gravity to pull, I think, subgroups together. And I think it's about becoming a hub. And in professional sports, especially, more or less, the higher up the ladder you are, the less the players tend to trust you because
Mm.
you're closer to, maybe you're closer to whatever, you're closer to the GM, or you're closer to the owner, or you're closer to whoever they see in that organization that views them as an asset, right? Um, and so
I
with
feel like
that,
that's a really important point, that I don't think I've heard a lot of people say before, but I feel that myself for sure. I think there's a lot of accuracy in that,
yeah,
and
uh,
potentially then a lot of room, capacity to take advantage of that in a good way.
right. I mean, and I think that's where the opportunity within professional sports is to be, um, to kind of have some influence on just like the culture, for lack of a better term,
Mm.
where you're gonna have to pour out quite a lot, and you're gonna have to take quite a lot on. But because they're in this, because what professional sports has become so transactional, like guys are looking for somebody they can depend on. They're looking for somebody they can trust. They're looking for emotional stability, right? Because you guys just have to, I think, as volatile as it is for coaches, it's equally, if not more volatile for players. Like, sure, they've got more financial security because their paychecks are bigger, but any given moment, you can be out of the league, you can be traded and have to upend your life. And so a lot of them, you kind of see these stability seeking behaviors. A lot of them become creatures of habit. A lot of them are, or when they get later in their careers, they'll kind of build their own teams of people that they work with in the off season because they need that stability. Like, um, and I was just talking to somebody about this after, I don't know how much basketball you watch, if any. Um,
Not at all.
but this past season, a very, very well-known player got traded from an organization where they figured they were drafted to, and everyone figured they were gonna play out their career there. And it was like it was shocking. It was an absolutely just kind of, it was an internet breaking trade.
Mhm.
And you've heard people say similar things before, but a lot of players were like, wow, if so and so can get traded, then nobody's safe,
Mm.
right? And I think that goes beyond just the trade scenario to the actual, like, feeling of safety, actual feeling of, like, is this a safe place to be vulnerable, to fail,
Mm.
to really, maximize my development by, kind of utilizing all of the bandwidth I have. A lot of places are going to get pigeonholed, and get squeezed, and it's going to be like, if you're not a star, like, you better be a good little soldier and, like, kind of shut your mouth. And and so they need people they can trust, right? And I think that being that person, showing that showing that you care, showing that you're not just an asset manager, um, goes a long way, and that can pull guys in. And I don't know how other teams do it, but like, we worked in pods, and so we were each responsible for the individual programming for a certain number of athletes. And so if you can be that like that hub, if you can create some of that stability for your like pod, and if you can be human enough to identify this person's individual needs and say, I'm going to meet you where you're at, I'm going to give you what you need when you need it, which sometimes is kicking the ass. Like to be fair, it's not always just like a hug. Sometimes it is kicking the ass, but if you can do that and you can be real with them, they're pretty intuitive. They've had people kissing their ass their whole lives, and so they know when you're being real with them, and they appreciate that, and that makes you a hub, and that makes you not only valuable to the player but also to the organization. And I think organizations realize that, and I think that is how a lot of how they seek to utilize strength and conditioning staff, support staff, things like that. You often
Those
hear like
those the abilities that you're talking about there seem like those are the ones that you learn when you're studying for the CSCS. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the entire first chapter.
Was it? Or you learned about those abilities in your undergrad degree.
Yeah, and I think
How did you pick up those? Is that something that you just kind of, all right, this isn't maybe the job that I thought I was walking into, but it is the job that I've got, and I'm going to try and do as good a job of this as I possibly can. But I need to learn about X, Y, and Z to be able to do that. And then the process, I'm assuming that's the process so far. And then how did you then learn those abilities, you specifically? Is that something you just kind of learned on the job and tried to get better at? Or did you have mentors and other coaches that you could talk to that were doing similar things? I mean, what was your process like throughout this?
yeah, well, I think the first thing is I think I've been a little surprised at where other people have identified like the value that they've seen me bring, because I think I always wanted to be like technician. And
Hmm.
so I think I was fairly surprised to find that the commentary came most about the soft skills. Um, and like I care about people, like again, these are the environments and the ways in which I connect with people. A lot of so many athletes that I've worked with, we're still tight. So I think there's definitely there's something innate to it of being just like, I care, because there's a lot of people who just don't.
Yeah.
You work around those people, and some of them can last quite a long time, and they can do well in certain positions, partly because they're not emotionally invested. But like, I'm just like, man, like I care. I'm not gonna. I can't remove. Not can't remove, but like I don't want to have to remove the human element from my practice. Right? It's a people business. Um, and so I think, one, I like knowing how things work. I think I've got a pretty mechanistic brain, and so I'm always looking. I'm like, where are these behaviors coming from? Like, what are the influences? What are the forces at work here? What are the bodies in this system with the most gravity? Like, how are people being pulled by this? And because I think in some cases you might walk into an organization and just be completely lost by what you're seeing, by saying like, like, we've got, like, it seems like the leadership is saying all the right things, they're providing all this stuff, people get paid well, like where's the disconnect? And if you kind of pay attention and just, yeah, yeah, I think pay attention and like take an interest, listen a lot. um you find out where the cracks are, you find out where the shit's at, and then you quickly see, okay, like, this is something that is not only a feature of, or it's a feature of the system, not a bug.
Hmm.
Right? And then you can kind of adjust for it. And the more little like pieces of how this thing works, the more accurately you can model. And then, okay, someone comes in with a certain like disposition, temperament, whatever, you're aware of these features of the system. And so now, instead of being on the back foot and saying, okay, this person's in the hole, I gotta try to pull them out, you can be proactive and be like, okay, I know what this thing is. You've seen this before. here's some things you might struggle with, and kind of have some strategies ready for them. Because so much of the negative emotion, negative behavior comes from ending up on the wrong side of the expectation reality discrepancy, right? Thought it was going to be one thing, ends up being another thing. You're wrong in the wrong direction,
Mhm.
and the crash is massive. So if we can mitigate those, then we can keep our guys more even keel. Like something comes up and you're like, okay, you're prepared, more or less, right? You're prepared for this. We didn't just kind of let you like walk into a wall with it and say, well, you're a pro now, you're a grown man now, you're this, that, the other. Like, it's like, no, like if you care, like, which, we should, um, then you prepare people, right? Not just physically, because so much of the difficulty that's built into the system is not physical, right? It's guys having to come in pro sports, for example, say come in and understand like you're not just here to play basketball. Like you're now an ambassador for a global like sports marketing brand, right? You're gonna have expectations attached to you based on that. Like again, like everything that like whether it's media, whether it's the extra work that you don't want to do, it's like you have to realize as far as the organization is concerned, if you are the kind of guy who won't do these things, let's say physical prep, that makes you a bad investment because that's going to shorten your shelf life again. So
Do they get that on the whole? Like most of the athletes, yeah, I understand that. Or is that something that part of your responsibility is to teach them those sort of skills or give them an understanding or better understanding about that part of it?
yeah, I'd say a lot of them end up understanding, but I think a lot of them are quite resistant to it, unfortunately. And I do think that it's the ideally you have vets in your locker room who can
Yeah.
teach your guys these things, right? Because obviously you as an S&C, you're an emissary of the organization,
Mhm.
and you don't obviously want to be doing the double speak or anything like that. Um, so I think again, being honest with guys where it's appropriate is 100% our jobs. Because again, that that is part of preparing them for just being a professional athlete. But yeah, a lot of times you hope you have vets who are vocal. And when you have vets who aren't vocal, then like your young guys are just kind of stumbling around in the dark trying to figure it out. And to be frank, I was with the Nets for 3 years, so I mean, I first two of them, I'm stumbling around trying to trying to
Mm.
like really nail down what's happening, or really kind of figure out what the organizing principles are here. Um, but I think that's a huge part of taking care of the whole person. Um, like it's a you're like I don't know, like pro sports is the dream for so many people. And I think especially when guys are coming out of college and maybe they're a one and done, maybe they're out 4 years, and so much of what they were doing is like it's just about basketball. NCAA now, like depending on what school you go to, pay someone to go to class for you. Like your life is about basketball, and it's about performing well in basketball. Then you come up to the league, and like the big game is a billionaire selling the team for an extra couple $1 billion in 5 years, right? Like, and they have to protect the brand, and they have to protect like all of that, and then the GM, right? And it just like trickles down until you're like, well, okay, that's what the pressure is based on. So even if you're looking at your GM stressed the hell out, and they're stressing people out, and you're like, well, like, okay, they're probably we see them as the top of the organization here, but they might be getting some shots from above as well. Like, so you kind of have to be able to, as an S&C support staff, you're sitting at the bottom of the hill, the shit's rolling down,
Mm.
and so you got to have a pretty big appetite for shit, and a pretty big shovel. But I think that just again, so having that genuine drive to care for people, and having that be something that refuels you and doesn't just drain you, um, is a pretty huge asset if that's your profile as a coach.
Working in professional sport, what was the most Because I can sense a little frustration from you. We've had obviously many conversations about this, about maybe more than a little frustration. But what is the most frustrating, or what was the most frustrating part of working in professional sport? And what was the hardest part about it? If it's different, then what is the most frustrating?
Yeah. Huh. I mean, I think I found it frustrating that in certain environments you are resource poor, and you're like, man, if I just had the resources, like what, yeah, we could do so much with with just a little more.
Give me an
And then
example. What do you mean by
environment,
that?
resources in terms of like money, like straight up like money, equipment, facilities, like travel, like anything money can buy, right? You're just like, if I could throw some money at this, it would be we could make some like progress potentially, right? Um, and
So
that's like
the dumbbells weren't nice enough. Is that what you're talking about? The barbells didn't spin properly. Like what do you
I would
about?
say more so in the way that like more like optimizing a system, right? So whether that is the tech you have access to, whether that is the athlete management system you're using, whether that is, you know, somebody building you a bespoke AMS because like maybe you've got the money for that or you don't, like things that just remove friction from the
Hmm.
system, right? So and I think that like, you know, and that could be human resources too. That could be another coach to work with, right? I mean, so there are, I think, in a lot of collegiate and a lot of, unless you're like a huge Power Five school, a lot of Olympic sports, you're generally going to be like resource poor, right? You're going to be doing more with less, as it were. I think in professional sports, you can have obviously you can have so much resources that like we can do everything. But just because you can do everything doesn't mean you should do everything. And so I think that can lead to a lack of discernment where it's okay, we're just throwing the kitchen sink at it. And that it's like, okay, well, this is not clarifying. This is not actually removing friction from the system. It's actually adding friction to the system. You're clogging the pipes with dollar bills, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think like I find that frustrating just because I'm like, oh well, I like efficiency. I'm very efficiency oriented. I like I have a very positive reaction to efficiency. Um, but so that would be the most frustrating thing is just like being having the ability to, hey, we could streamline the shit out of this.
Yeah.
We can do this. We can do this to a level that's just like absolutely top tier from both ends, as opposed to okay, we have the resources to and the bodies to just throw at this, so we're just going to throw money and bodies at this,
Mm.
and you end up burning people out, and you end up
Mm.
just like not you don't get a return on investment. You just kind of flounder, and you end up wasting a lot of people's time and talent. I know a lot of people who don't feel that they're, you know, being able to practice at a very high level, depending on what their situation and environment or what the ask is. And that's a shame because I think these organizations tend to do very well at bringing in very talented people. And then to say, okay, cool, we got a talented person and it looks good to have this talent here and then not maximize it is a shame. And that's obviously I'm not talking about me. I'm talking obviously other people I've worked with, just brilliant people who you know they're no longer doing it. So that frustrates me. I'd say the hardest part, man, that might I mean that might I think the actual mechanics of that might actually also be like the hardest part. Like overcoming that tendency might be the hardest part because again, if you're coming from outside of pro sports and you haven't had the resources and all of a sudden you do, then it can be difficult to like lock down and lock in. So
I was speaking last week with Stacy Harden.
Yeah.
She works in the NWSL, and she's basically with a startup team. Like she was
Right.
first in the door with this team. Um, and you're part of the world. She's in San Jose.
Yes.
I think she's in San Jose. Yeah, I think it was definitely San Jose. And she talked similarly to how I often talk about my come up with Matt Jordan and
Mm.
others, where we essentially just had a broom closet in the basement.
Right.
So many constraints around the environment which we were working with that we had to work through. And I feel
Right.
like that just provided such an incredible and rich learning environment for us, these constraints. And she said it's very similar, right? They don't have a full-time facility. Their their offices are in a old shower room,
Right.
so it's like it's really cool. There's something to be said about that, right?
Yeah.
Where you remove some of or you just constrain some of these financial things that you're talking about, that it forces you to become more effective and more efficient. If you were you're not currently working in professional sport, but if somebody was to offer you a role now in professional sport and you said, "Man, that sounds great. I want to take that." What would you do differently? What would you take into that next role that you were not able to do or didn't have the expertise or experience to bring into your last role in professional sport? Is there something that you would, if I'm hiring you and I'm the performance director of this gig and I'm offering you $1 million a year and this is a perfect gig, like what are you going to bring to that you didn't bring to the last one? Like what have you learned?
Yeah. I think especially in the team sport setting, I think I would lean harder into the soft skills. So I think
Hmm.
the culture piece is where our value is a lot of the times
Do
in
you feel like, yeah, like we've talked about this a ton, and like every conversation I have with anybody working in sport now, that's the thing.
right,
That is the thing.
right.
That's
And
not what we are as strength and conditioning coaches, performance professionals, whatever. That's not what we're trained in. We kind
right,
of develop them, and maybe we take some courses, and maybe we read Brett's book, and we get better at it.
right.
None of us are professional at that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's first of all, that seems like, oh, that's a problem. When this is the gig, and none of us are actually trained to do that gig, but we're supposed to be being professional and do it now. And the one thing that you want to do better is that. So that either speaks to the lack of structured education in that stuff, or the appreciation for that stuff in the education of the people who are working in these businesses. Or maybe this should be a separate role for somebody coming in. I don't know.
Okay.
Like, is it? Should it be?
No, and I mean I think and here's where I see it in the performance world, right? I think it's like support staff are support staff, right? They want you, they want all rounders. You know what I mean? And if there weren't if certain uh leagues hadn't had their people unionized, like they'd still be hiring people with the expectation that you're an all-arounder. Like you're yes, you're a strength coach, but you're also a roadie. You're also the hype guy, the get back coach, whatever it is. Like they're like, we want good people around the guys. And these roles tend to be the ones that spend the most time around the athletes. And so like that, I think that's why it gets strength coaches get screened for like either character, energy, culture, those kinds of things, because just the sheer amount of contact hours.
Yeah.
And when I say lean harder into the soft skill, I don't necessarily mean like in a rah rah way, but in a once you've been in professional sports, you now have a lot of this political knowledge that you will not gain outside of the professional sports world, and then knowing how and where and why guys coming in or guys who've been in it for a while struggle with that, and being able to be like an effective outlet for that, being able to kind of it's more of a care role than a rah rah role, right? It's like we're like more being on like a care team, and I think obviously the technical skill has to be there. That's that's your title, it's your job. But I don't think it's the same in individual sport. I will say that. I think, yes, I think people generally want good people around them regardless. But I think in individual sports, I've seen it where the athletes have taken on this physical prep thing because it's like, my sport is what I can do with my body, right? And these skills. And so it's a much more, it's a pretty short walk to why does this matter? As opposed to team sports and then more skill-based team sports where you're just like, well, I can hide. I can hide my lack of athleticism by just having higher game IQ. I can hide my lack of athleticism by hiding in the scheme. I have phenomenal upside and it's not developed yet, but a coach can, place me in this scheme in a way that like maximizes my superpower. And great, cool. But individual sport athletes take on the physical prep thing way more and way easier than I've seen with team sport athletes outside of maybe like football. I think collision sport athletes they know it's helpfully big.
Yeah.
And I think that might be, given that I come from track and field and it's a massive no-brainer in track and field. It's easier for me to, I think, maybe to go on like the ski team, right? Is like, even with senior athletes who I'm doing rehabs with, it's just, it makes way more sense because you're like, okay, like you're gonna have to, you yourself are gonna have to put those boards back on and go fly down a mountain at 80 miles an hour. Like it behooves us to do everything we can to be ready for that, right? Like we're maxing it out. We're pushing the line. And I do find that was something that I perhaps underappreciated before about where my resonance with athletes kind of came from, is that appreciation for like you're gonna have to floor it. Like that's it. And with the ski team athletes, even, it's like, to be dramatic about, like, you could die. Like you could go out there and you could, if you're not as prepared as you can be, and even if you were, like, you could die. Like, we're taking this seriously. You know what I mean? Where it's not as big a, it's just a longer walk to that point from a team sport athlete, right? It's just not the same situation. But for them, what's really important is, again, that they are able to come together as a group, and that emergent quality, that's what makes successful teams, right? Obviously, a glut of talent can get you a very long way, but we've all seen like hyper talented teams that didn't amount to much because they couldn't gel, they couldn't make it work together. I mean, it's obviously it's public, so that's what happened with, like, the Nets had some. When I came to the Nets, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, three of the most incredible offensive players ever played the game, and through some bad luck and a whole lot of other stuff, like it didn't happen, right? Like, so that cohesion piece is super important. And honestly, the new head coach, Jordi Fernandez, who actually worked with the Kings over Jazz, he has, I think he's like a class away from a PhD in sports psych, but man, he's taken a group that they're in a rebuild, so it's a younger group, but like you just see that group gelling and that cohesion, and you hear how they talk about, Jordy believes in us, and Jordy like kind of like he wants us to use the full extent of our skills, and like he believes in us, and so we believe in him and we believe in us, and that belief piece, that shared belief, that's what's powerful in a group, right? I mean, that's religion, right? Like, look at what, like, just humankind was able to accomplish incredible things because religion allowed larger groups of people to cooperate. And so again, that emergent quality of just the sheer force of will, it's an exponential multiplier rather than just a kind of like more linear path. And I think that to me is a great reason to be like, okay, like this does provide value. Because you can sit back and say, like, man, this rah-rah bullshit is just like it's not what I'm trained in, it's not where my value is, it's not this, it's not that. But at the end of the day, like in a team sport, especially, like that cohesion is everything. That emergent quality, that shared force with that entrainment is everything.
Chris, thanks for joining us. I
Pleasure.
appreciate it. And I'll see you in a few weeks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Appreciate you, Stu.
Well, that was a great conversation with Chris. He will be joining us in Chicago to help host a couple of the discussion sessions at the Altis Speed Summit. I think he's going to do an amazing job. I really look forward to it. Thanks again for tuning in to the Altis Speed Summit podcast. A big thank you once again to our sponsors, 3x4 Genetics, Stat Sports, 1080 Sprint, Team Builder, and Output Sports for making this event possible. And if you haven't secured your ticket yet, head over to altis.world and we'll see you in Chicago June 6th, 7th, and 8th. Thank you for listening.